I'm Nick Westergaard, and this is On Brand, helping you tell your story. Hello, and welcome to On Brand Taylor's Version. In our first episode of the series, we're joined by Sinéad O'Sullivan, aerospace engineer turned business strategist, former head of strategy at Harvard Business School, professor, writer, and co-founder of a global investment fund. She's advised everyone from NASA to prime ministers, and she also happens to be in the top 0.01% of Taylor Swift fans worldwide. Her new book, Good Ideas and Power Moves, Business Lessons from Taylor Swift, hits shelves this week, and she's here to share why Taylor isn't just a pop star, but one of the sharpest strategists of our time. My interview with Sinéad O'Sullivan is coming right up, but first...
Are you tired of juggling multiple software tools to manage your agency? Say hello to Deltek Workbook, the ultimate solution for marketing and communication agencies. With Workbook, you can streamline your projects, resources, and finances all in one place. Imagine real-time dashboards and reports giving you full visibility into your projects, people, and financials. Plan your team's capacity weeks in advance to avoid bottlenecks while staying on budget to maximize project margins. Plus, Workbook works perfectly for both agencies and in-house marketing teams looking to boost efficiency and profitability. And here's the best part. At PCI, we're a certified Deltek partner and reseller offering expert implementation, integrations, and ongoing support to ensure your success. Want to see how Deltek Workbook can transform your operations? For a free consultation, visit pci.us/podcast today. That's pci.us/podcast.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. Between two-factor authentication, strong passwords, and a VPN, you try to be in control of how your info is protected. But many other places also have it, and they might not be as careful. That's why LifeLock monitors hundreds of millions of data points a second for threats. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it. Guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast for 40% off. Terms apply.
Sinéad O'Sullivan, I am thrilled to have you here for our first episode of On Brand Taylor's Version.
I'm just excited that everything in my life is now Taylor's version.
Everything.
It turns out that writing a book about Taylor Swift can only make your life more fun.
See, mission accomplished. And, you know, by kind of domino effect, it made my life more fun as well. And speaking of fun, we're going to kick off each episode with some little story prompt cards for each era. And so if you pick an era, I will ask you a question. Okay,
this is so much fun. Okay, I'm going to go with Reputation, but I'm nervous. For Reputation,
okay, well,
yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, as it is Reputation, snake pick, tell a story about a time someone misunderstood you and what you did.
Oh my God. Well, I mean, I used to work for NASA, so that was frequent. My mom still has no idea what I do. Shout out to my mom. So yeah, I mean, I guess, you know, the work I used to do at NASA, it was a lot of optimizing math. And I was, you know, the long version made short is that I worked on human spaceflight missions. The day-to-day of that was doing a lot of math optimization. However, actually, now that I think about it, people are kind of more confused about what it means to do strategy. You know, at least if you say you work for NASA, people are like, okay, I got it. There's a building, there's engineers, people, you know, there's rovers and launch vehicles. But strategy seems to be kind of more, you know, like, oh God, PowerPoints and presentations and less exciting. But I mean, constantly people misunderstand what I do. But I'm going to go with my mom, who has never understood what I do, and it changes a lot, as you can probably tell from the intro.
Well, I love that, and I love that turn of the phrase "do strategy," because it makes it active, and I think sometimes what kind of makes people, maybe your mom included, kind of back away from, oh, we're going to start talking about strategy, is it feels like you said, PowerPoints. But there's something very active about the best strategy. And I wonder, both what that means to you and what made you think, who's really good at, quote, doing strategy is Taylor Allison Swift.
Oh my gosh. Well, so I mean, the word strategy, as I write about in my book, is used all the time. And because I work in the space, I hear it all the time. And I'll sit in a meeting and people will talk about strategically doing strategy or strategically strategize. This is like if you were drinking shots, you'd be drunk at the beginning of a meeting. The number of times strategy is brought up. I mean, I think people really misunderstand what it is, and it just basically means to create a prioritization of resources. So whether you're a company, an organization, a country, an economy, you have a finite number of resources. And having a strategy is figuring out which order and how you want to prioritize those very scarce resources. People think it means like creating some sort of a dream or a wish list of things that they wish to achieve. And I can't even tell you the number of times I've been in meetings with, chief strategy officers, and they've said, this is our strategy. And they will quite literally roll out these 100 plus page length PowerPoints. And at the end, they're the best in the world. They're the biggest. They have the highest margins. They have the most number of customers. Everyone's happy. But you think, like, how are you actually achieving this? This is just a wish list. And so having a strategy both implies that you have created this kind of, allocation of scarce resources, but then you actually have to do it and follow through with it. And I remember thinking about this obviously a lot when I moved into the business world. And Taylor Swift does this extraordinarily well. In fact, one of the first articles I wrote about strategy, probably 6 years ago, was about Taylor Swift and strategy. And I've been thinking about her and her strategy for a really long time, because it has been very obvious to Swifties, of which, as you mentioned, I am one, that how she creates her business through her albums and how those albums kind of relate to each other is very different to any other performing artist. And as somebody who thinks about strategy a lot, I think about her albums as individual products and product lines. And it's so rare that an artist is able to so succinctly bring together so many of her products in this kind of overarching strategic way. And the more time I spent looking at kind of very famous organizations who, or which supposedly have these great strategies, I realized that Taylor's was always better than theirs. So I have been thinking about Taylor Swift and her strategy for many years. And I think what we're seeing today is the outcome of her doubling down on that strategy, album after album after album. And for a lot of people who haven't traditionally been Swifties, they kind of feel like she came out of nowhere. Like they'd heard about her for ages, but then overnight she just became really famous and very successful. And oh my God, I've had so many arguments with editors that I've worked with, articles I've tried to publish. They kind of say she's a recording artist like any that's popular, and she'll come and go. But what's different about her and her strategy is that it has permanently changed the music industry. So even if Taylor Swift does come and go, her legacy is that the industry will be very different after her.
Can I tell you, I feel like I have had, obviously not to your degree with writing the book, but I'm familiar with arguments of why frame things around her. Is it really all of that? And I think, I think there's all kinds of what you can learn about XYZ from so-and-so. And this is a very good book with some amazing lessons on that idea of doing strategy. And you have the all of it broken out by these power moves, and they're all very active. And to that last point, you talk about, her in terms of kind of the constellations of products. And one of the first lessons that you talk about in the book is building worlds, not products. What can Taylor's universe teach us about community, belonging, and brand building?
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of articles, I mean, I obviously read a lot of articles about Taylor Swift, and even now just people, knowing that I was writing a book about her will send me anything and everything that is written about her, which is a lot for the last year and a half. And it's a common one to hear that, or to read that people will write about, here's how Taylor Swift has built her brand. But they tend to refer to branding and marketing in very typical ways, advertising, word of mouth, creating community. It's very unclear, however, that through those articles that they don't really get to the mechanism of how she's done that. And I think what is really interesting about Taylor Swift is that she basically took one of the most valuable entertainment companies in the world and has one-upped them at their own strategy. And, I wrote about this in the New Yorker when her TTPD, the Tortured Poets Department, for anyone who's not.
I'm with you. I followed.
When her album came out. And I said, basically, if you look at the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which has created, just insane value for Disney, Taylor Swift, long before Disney had acquired Marvel, had been doing this with her own albums. And what I mean by that is that instead of creating individual products as musicians would, an album, they tour, 18 months later, another album, then they tour that album. Of course, most of the revenue being made on the tour as opposed to the album streams. She started to create these interlinked universes. Each era, as she now calls them, instead of a film, I guess, is this world with villains and archenemies and characters. And over the albums, we see that these characters are kind of intermixed, and there's character development. And every time she releases a new album, she's the only performing artist in the world whose new album will double the revenue that is generated on previous albums, because every new piece of context or information changes the meaning for the rest of her world, or her version of, the Taylor Swift cinematic universe. So it's, of course, an incredibly smart thing to do as the CEO of a range of products, because you create one album, you market one album, but then you kind of get the revenue uplift for all of the other albums that people then go back to. And we saw this in an insane way with the Tortured Poets Department, because some of the lines or some of the songs that she released suggested that, without getting too much into Taylor gossip, suggested that her previous albums were not in fact written about the people, the enemies, and the characters that we thought they were written about back then, but someone completely different. And so this meant every single one of her previous products ended up being back in the album charts. And this created just this kind of unstoppable set of synergies around her as a performing artist, the revenue that she got, not only from one product, but from, the 12 before that, or the 11 before that. And yeah, she was very clever to create this very interlinked, set of products around her that was turned into a fan universe. And we see brands have been trying to do this on and off for years. It's very, very hard to do that. And Taylor Swift has managed to absolutely nail that.
On Brand, we'll be right back after this.
Bustin' with the Boys is here to let you know that every college football Saturday, FanDuel is dropping profit boosts that can turn wins into bigger wins.
Sounds like we should rename Saturday Booster Day.
Nice.
21 plus and present in select states. Opt-in required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable profit boost tokens. Restrictions apply, including any token expiration and max wager amount. See full terms at FanDuel.com/sportsbook. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
Now, back to the show. You talk about Taylor nailing this kind of interconnected universe, and I'm sure there's folks out there sitting there listening, thinking, "How do you do that?" And I think it gets back to everything that you've been talking about, everything that the book talks about is looking at all of this very, very, very strategically. And one, that's why it's worth having articles and books and things dissecting this. But is there an easy answer to say, how can I, for my shoe company, my software company, create something as big of a universe, an interconnected, community-based universe?
I think we're starting to see this crop up maybe more organically in different industries. One that I keep going back to. So I'm not one of these perennially online people. I have social media. I barely know how to use it, which to the upset of my publishers. But what I do notice when I go on it, some of the people I followed for a long, let's say Instagram, which is the one I probably know more about, not a whole ton, just FYI. But you can go online and see that some of the influencers or the kind of personas, the people that are, Instagrammers, are starting to become friends with other Instagrammers, and that's interesting because it kind of turns into this like kind of real life. I mean, the group in particular I'm thinking about now are all based in Manhattan. And I'm like, wow, this is kind of like a real life Sex and the City where you have each of these different characters, and sometimes they're in each other's episodes. Sometimes they're in their own episodes with their own life, and they kind of create this universe where you feel like you're a part of that. So, I mean, it's very, very kind of like lurking in through the window and watching people kind of the way we would, I mean, I don't know the age group demographic of the listeners for this show, but the TV show Friends, you kind of sit there watching them watch TV together. Well, now on Instagram, I can see, one of the Instagrammers is friends with the other one. Individually, they have maybe 500,000 followers each, but I can see them having dinner together and follow what happens on a night out with them. That's a really interesting way of building a world by bringing together characters from different places and kind of merging them. When it comes to products, I mentioned that brands have been trying to do this for a while. I think that the luxury goods industry has been really trying to figure this out for a very long time. And I think that collaborations and partnerships is the way that has happened the most. And I keep going back to the movie that I think had the largest impact in terms of world building in such a short amount of time was Barbie. Oh my God. You could not, I mean, this was 2 years ago, maybe more. You could not leave the house without something being Barbie. Ferrari made the Barbie car in that shade of pink. Tiffany's, there was a Barbie, Airbnb created the Barbie house. Rolex did a Barbie watch. I mean, absolutely anything and everything was Barbie. And this kind of created this universe that kind of brought to life this kind of idea that they were building a world, not just a single one-off movie. And, since then we have heard that I think there are 30 something, maybe more, movies in the pipeline of the Mattel Barbie cinematic universe series. So I think, Taylor Swift, obviously she's been playing this game for decades, plural. She was well ahead of her competitors. The question I have, which is more interesting, is are they going to be able to keep up with her? Are they going to be able to overtake her because she has 20 plus years on someone who's starting to build universe fan bases today? But in our day-to-day lives, I'm starting to see it everywhere. Once you understand it, you can, even podcasters, some of the big podcast, the big podcasts, they all go on each other's podcasts. And there's this kind of idea of that they're friends in real life and you can listen into each of their conversations. I mean, I guess the idea is that you feel like you're eavesdropping on them in the same way that it's a very parasocial relationship we have with Taylor Swift. Even we feel like we know who she's writing about in her songs, even though she would never publicly say it out loud.
So we've passed the halfway point. So it's your turn to pick an era for me to answer a question about.
Okay, I'm going to go with my second favorite album, which is Fearless.
Okay, Fearless. And I've got...
I love these cards. This is a fun game.
Got the fearless card right here. Tell a story about a time you were brave or scared. Oh, I go back to summer camp, and we got to spend a night in the Big Lodge once, and
Wait,
it was
contextualize this. How old are you at summer camp?
Oh, summer camp. Yeah, it was this summer. It was I was probably grade school, so like 4th or 5th grade. So
Okay.
And we got to stay in the Big Lodge, and there were bats in there, and it was my first time seeing and I think, and to this day, I can handle a lot of things. Bats, even like when I see them in the neighborhood flying out of a tree outdoors, it's like not cool. Don't like it. But I stayed with my friends because I didn't want to be the one that left. But I found a way to completely just eyes peeking out of the sleeping bag.
I had a conversation about bats this week. My friend from Ireland told me, I'm from Ireland, and I had not heard this before, that in Ireland, apparently, if you're around a bat, you have to put a plastic bag over your head so it can't bite you. I don't like bats. I don't know anything about them, but you were probably correct to stay under the duvet.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you enjoy these cards. And what I love that I think connects back to Taylor is you talk about how she puts so much of herself, so much of her stories. There's that great line in the documentary of, her talking about the house that I bought with the money that I made for the stories about my life. And what I like is kind of the ripple effect of that. I mentioned your book being a very powerful strategy book, but I really love that there's a lot of you in there. Like we were talking about, I was late beforehand. But I know from the book that you're a runner, and I'm like, I tried to get a run in. I made a mistake. Talk about that in the process of, to me, it seemed very conscious because it's what she does that you did that as well. Am I right, or am I projecting that onto your work?
No, yes, I think that's correct. This book involved some bits about me because it is through my lens that I see her in this way. And I think that is a very specific lens. And I guess I'll give you an example. I live in two different worlds when I think about Taylor Swift. One is that I'm a Swiftie. I've been listening to her music forever. I when I was writing my grad school dissertation, I wrote 40,000 words listening to the same album on repeat. I can just picture my life, what I was doing through every era and the highs and the lows. And, I've lived my life through her albums. Then I'm also, outside of being a Swiftie, I love finance. I love business. I love strategy. And I write a lot in those worlds. And I have found it very hard when I try to explain to editors why they should, and this was, maybe more so a couple of years ago before she had become so obviously correct in how she was doing her strategy. Those editors would struggle to understand why Taylor Swift was relevant. And I kind of had this very strong idea that while Swifties understood that she was amazing, very few of them had the finance and strategy background that I had to understand specifically why that was. So that was one thing that I really wanted to get that very kind of unique, I'm a kind of quote unquote serious finance strategy person, but I also happen to love Taylor Swift. The other thing is that the world has changed drastically since I started studying business and finance. I look increasingly to people that I've mentioned in the book to understand leadership and how to execute on a good strategy. I was asked to give a talk several years ago, a very kind of boring talk to several thousand business people. And they wanted me to discuss a very famous strategy paper that had been written in the 1970s that had come out of Harvard Business School. And I talked about Pharrell instead. I thought it was way more relevant. I think we have more to learn from Pharrell today than we do from, many of the business academics from the 70s. Taylor Swift is one of these people. I think all the time about what would her business look like today had she been like every other executive and brought McKinsey in 5 years ago. McKinsey being a very well-known, established management consulting company. Taylor Swift's strategy is so far outside the realm of what we teach in business schools because she is part of this very new and dynamic group of kind of these founder entrepreneur CEOs. You have Jeff Bezos, Taylor Swift, Elon Musk, that just operate in such different ways from, more established CEOs of large corporations. And so I think I bring that kind of unique lens to this book through having met some of the people that I think are in her peer group, maybe not in terms of how they have, sold albums to the same extent that she has or toured, but that have created their own personal and professional success in ways that are outside of what we would typically at Harvard Business School call like corporate leadership and corporate strategy. And so that is a unique lens that I think that I have. And so I wanted to bring that into the book.
So when speaking of leadership, when I scanned the table of contents, one of the power moves is about being anti-fragile. And it stopped me because at first I'm like, I'm trying to think, I'm like, what does that mean? How does that work? But it's really talking about thriving in chaos, which, as you note, there is even more of today. You do some like pandemic framing with that, but it's kind of, I feel like that's the new normal is abnormality.
No, absolutely. I think this is a concept that is very well known in finance, and it's one that I got to know many years ago when I was engineering. This idea of chaos theory, complexity, and being anti-fragile. It's probably the first thing that I think of when I think about Taylor Swift, because she is quite literally the person who, when the chips are down, that's when she really, really comes into her own. And in a world that is becoming increasingly chaotic, I mean, I work in the space and defense industry. It's been a weird couple of years in that industry. And that's only one industry. What was it? 5 years ago was the onset of the pandemic. We're living through what the economist and historian Adam Tooze calls a polycrisis, this confluence of weird, crazy, once in many lifetimes scenarios, climate change, political unrest, and it's all kind of swirling around there. Then at Harvard, we think a lot about what are the qualities of a good leader, and how do we know that CEO A is going to be better than CEO B over the lifetime of the next 10 years? If you're a shareholder, how would you think about picking the next CEO if you're on the board? And then you have people like Taylor Swift who are just so different from who you might think of being as a typical CEO, yet has managed to thrive in many of the same ways that like Jeff Bezos has thrived. And I think part of that is being anti-fragile. When I say anti-fragile, people always think, okay, that you can maybe when there's something that's hard happening that you don't break. But it's actually not quite that. It's that not only does it not kill you, but it actually makes you stronger. And Taylor has organized, not only on a kind of personal level, I imagine her life that way, but her business is so anti-fragile. So, and we saw this during COVID, everyone else stopped recording, but her supply chain in terms of her studio, her producers, her direct-to-fan distribution was set up perfectly to thrive in this environment. And that, that she was able to do a lot during COVID that no one else could. And that kind of projected her into this kind of next level that she's kind of, operating in at the minute.
Well, speaking of operating in minutes and moments, I think a book is obviously a long process to work on, and here you are releasing this book this week. And I would say, what was it, like about a month ago that the everything in the Swiftverse got kicked up a notch again with new heights, new album, and engagement. And you're sitting here with a book about Taylor. So how did you? Well, forget about her for a sec. How'd you figure this timing out so perfectly?
Yeah, I'd like to thank my publishing company for organizing her engagement.
Well done. Best move. Talk about power moves.
That is the 11th power move. Organize your book release at the same time that Taylor gets engaged. It's incredible. She's very unpredictable. When I had thought I had finished writing the book, and then she released the double album that was TTPD, and I had to go back to the drawing board. You have to be very careful when you write anything about Taylor Swift, because anything that you're writing is liable to change very quickly, as I now know. But it's been very interesting because I have such a strong thesis on not only who she is as a leader and as a CEO, but her strategy and how she's figuring out her kind of next move and how she might be thinking about that. And it's fascinating to see what she's doing at the minute. I mean, I think I talk about this a lot in the book. She's bigger than music. She once upon a time, she probably wanted to be the top singer-songwriter. She was that a long time ago. Where do you go? Like, what do you do next? There's only one other industry that on an entertainment scale is bigger than the one that she's in. And wow, I think she just basically owns now half of it through the NFL. Now there's a very clear delineation between her personal life and her professional life here. But here's where I think this kind of the new heights, and, I wrote a Substack recently called, discussing that she's done what in the corporate universe we would call a reverse merger with the NFL, which is that basically she hasn't had to pay a single dime, but she now has market share. I mean, nearly 100% market share of NFL viewers, because not only, and I gave a lecture to a business school recently, and I asked, is there anyone that doesn't really know her music or her work? And I think 2 guys put up their hand. And I said, yeah, if you ever want a girlfriend, you're going to want to change that. And I think a lot of NFL sports, sports journalists, podcasts, now talk about her frequently. And a lot of, I guess, majority of NFL viewers are male. I think a lot of them now are understanding exactly who Taylor Swift is, because their other halves for the first time really give a shit. So I think she's managed to very quickly, quietly, and I don't know, cheaply, I would assume, without marketing dollars or any specific M&A costs related to it, acquire hundreds of millions of viewers overnight.
I love that reverse acquisition type idea there. And that's another thing that I would point out about the book, because I think the real easy headline is she's a genius marketer. And you mentioned this once earlier, but it's not in the ways that you would traditionally define that. So if you really do want to demystify that, I can't say enough good things about this book. As we start to wrap up, we usually ask for a brand that makes you smile. And I'm not going to ask any more tough questions about eras. It's just one of complete joy. What song, album, or era makes you smile?
Oh God, all of them. I'm going through. I mean, it changes. I'm going through a reputation. Obsession at the minute. Ask me next week, it could be different. But I'm very much doubling down on Reputation this week.
I like it. And it's like launch week. That feels like coming out of the gate strong and
it's interesting that this is the one album she didn't re-release. So
well, and I remember
I have questions about what she's going to do, if anything, around this album in the future.
Yeah, interesting. It's like, I have to imagine, do you have some sort of, so we'll jump into the future, and there's multiple editions of this. Do you have some sort of folder or Google Doc on afterword by the author to update us on, like you said, the 11th power move, or her next big thing?
Keeping up with Taylor Swift is not easy. I've just been throwing stuff into a Substack. I mean, someone emailed me the other day just asking, a question about athlete brand and valuations versus Taylor Swift, because, she's now surpassing most of the best paid athletes in the world,
Right.
which for, the music industry tends to very famously pay way under. And so, yeah, I guess just as more people kind of engage with her as a business, or with her business, and it's worth mentioning, by the way, she's one of the only CEOs in the world who is also her own product, which is fascinating. Because, that's where the whole thing with private equity coming in to buy her albums, really, they didn't understand what they were buying. They thought they were buying a catalog, and
Right,
she
yeah.
is the product, and they did not buy her. So that's also very interesting. But I think it's more people from different industries look at her and start to ask questions. I'm like, wow, yeah, that is actually interesting. Why is she bigger than, from a revenue perspective, than most athletes? And it makes me think about her impact on the industry in new and different ways. My answer to that is that the music industry has, for since its inception, has famously been this kind of long tail industry. There's never ever really been a single artist with majority market share until Taylor Swift, and now the industry is nearly a winner takes all industry. And so now we're seeing, if you're at the top of that, if you are the winner takes all in the music industry, you're now able to start seeing revenue and salaries start to overtake sports stars. But that requires her changing the entire industry to be able to enable that. And this is not an industry that's dumb or young, or, it's a very powerful industry. So yes, sorry, to answer your question, I guess as these questions come up and as I think about them more, I'm just kind of throwing them into a Substack or something, because there's a lot of them. I mean, the problem with this book was trying to cut down the number of things to talk about with her. You could write about her and what she's done and what she's doing all day. I mean, there's a lot there. But yeah, maybe there'll be a second version. post wedding, I'm excited to see what she does in, I guess, non-music industry as well. What she does in movies, in other arts. I think that's going to be really interesting. What, if anything, she does in sports.
Well, and like you said too, like what she is, and it's like the goal of being, the biggest in the music business, and it's almost like, I feel like her business is storytelling, and there's many different forms that can take, and she's pushed it within the music medium with experiences like the Eras tour, but there's other forms that could take too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you look at Disney's enterprise, I'm not saying there's going to be a Taylor Swift theme park, but you could look at the Harry Potter book series to better understand how that evolved into this kind of mega franchise. Again, it's difficult because she is a product and she's one person. So she faces now a real scalability challenge, which is, how do you take one person and turn it into this kind of multi-domain experiential type asset, which I think she's probably going to start to explore through movies and maybe sports. But it's very interesting. I think we're absolutely going to see a kind of like part B to her career. But I mean, Disney is a great example. I keep going back to it because Disney is traditionally the company that we think of when we think of this great corporate strategy. I'd argue that Taylor has now done it better. Disney is what created, or we think of when we think about this kind of branded storytelling. There's no doubt that Taylor's doing it better. The difference, and where I really think Taylor comes into her own, is that there's hundreds of thousands of people that work for Disney, and Taylor's team has less than 20 people on it. And when you think about the cultural impact of Disney versus Taylor Swift, I mean, at startups, you talk about the revenue per employee. If you look at the cultural impact per employee of Taylor versus Disney, it is extraordinary what she's doing. And I think I'm surprised that no one has really taken the time to really understand the mechanics of it before.
I was going to say, it's a very, I mean, to frame it as we would frame any business, it's different on almost every metric you could think of. So our last question is always, you've mentioned your Substack a couple of times, but where can folks go to learn more about who you are and what you do?
Well, I'm not going to refer, or I guess, I'm not going to refer anybody to my mom. We've already realized she doesn't know much. I don't know. I guess I have a website. I have a Twitter, which is probably more about the space industry work that I do. I created recently a Substack where I've started to kind of just put up stuff that I think is interesting at the time of writing. People can drop me a note. I get emails. In the book, I write this, and I really did mean it. You can just email anyone in the world, and most of the time they often for me have replied. And I've been getting emails from people who've been reading the book recently, and that's fun. I am not, unfortunately, like I said, I'm not one of these people who kind of perennially lives online. But yes, I'm around. Would love to. Oh my God, I love to talk to people about Taylor Swift.
Well,
so I'm more than happy to do that if anyone wants to.
And again, can't say enough good things about the book. It inspired this On Brand podcast mini-series. And Sinead, thank you for kicking it off with us.
Nick, thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
On Brand is part of the Marketing Podcast Network. If you like what you're hearing, if we've made you smile, you can always listen free on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever your favorite platform may be. And please take a moment and rate and review the podcast to help others find the show. Until next week, I'm Nick Westergaard, and I'll see you on the internet.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Robbie Samuels hosts the On the Schmooze podcast. Robbie, tell listeners what to expect from the show.
Since 2015, I've interviewed entrepreneurs who overcame challenges to achieve success in their field or industry. Tune in to On the Schmooze to listen as I ask deep questions to elicit untold stories about leadership and networking.
And where can people subscribe?
Find the show at ontheschmooze.com or on marketingpodcast.net, or just search for it wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard them. Go subscribe. This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.